Hello and welcome back to the AI with Maribel Lopez podcast, show, videocast, all of the above. I'm Maribel Lopez, and if you were listening to the last episode, I basically said I was going to come back with one more discussion that was related to some of the things I learned at NVIDIA GTC. And this was a discussion about what the chief data officer from Yum Brands had to say about building and scaling AI in 2026 and beyond. So that's what we're here to talk about today. And I want to start today with something I don't often say. I've been giving advice to enterprise AI buyers now for several years. Certainly a lot of inbound came in around the ChatGPT timeframe, and people started to see the power of generative AI. But the advice that I've been giving in the past is no longer enough. And that's not necessarily a comfortable thing to admit, but I think it's an important one. And so here's what I mean. It's not necessarily that the advice I've been giving you is wrong. It's that there needs to be more, right? For depending on where you are. So I've been giving a lot of basic AI advice. So for the last few years, my consistent recommendation has been start with a tightly scoped use case, define the problem, tie it to your specific business goal, like improving Net Promoter Score or decreasing your cost of goods sold by 10%. Look for the KPIs that might be related to that, etc. You're supposed to be proving value in a controlled context before you try to scale. And that advice is still correct for many organizations that are new to AI. But we're several years into it now. So if you're past that stage, if you started shipping production AI, you've learned from it, and now you're trying to figure out how to scale across your organization. That advice obviously doesn't go far enough anymore because you've done your tightly scoped use cases, you've proven your value, you know how to measure. You're really trying to do that to understand what's going on with the process. So at NVIDIA GTC last week, I heard something from Cameron Davies, the chief data officer at Yum Brands, that I haven't been able to stop thinking about, and I want to walk you through what he said and what I think it means for how enterprise leaders should be thinking about AI right now. So I guess I would start this discussion with, we could talk a little bit about who Yum Brands is and how that might color their perspective. So context on Yum Brands. Because of the scale of the operation, this is what makes the lesson so instructive around the concept of scale. Yum Brands is the parent company of a lot of companies that you may know and frequent, KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, The Habit, Burger Grill. They operate more than 63,000 restaurant locations across 155 countries. They do nearly 100 million transactions a day. They have 1,500 franchisees, and they do more than 40 billion in digital sales. That's a big number. Now think about what that means to deploy an AI system at that scale. You have in a company like Yum, he said he had over 500 different point of sale systems, multiple back of office systems, menus that change, not just across brands, but within regions and within the same brand. So a brand reputation that's been built over decades and could be damaged by a single viral video. So Davies put it plainly when he looked at the audience and he said, failure at machine scale is incredibly risky. It can kill you very, very quickly. And I agree with that. And that has been what has held so many organizations back. But at some point we have to move beyond the POC, beyond the basic AI ROI use case, and into something that scales. But for someone like Yum, that concept's not hyperbole. At 100 million transactions a day, one bad AI decision doesn't fail quietly. It fails loudly, it fails repeatedly, and it fails fast. So that is the context for how we're going to be thinking about scale. So what does that mean for how you plan AI? Well, the standard playbook says define a use case, build something well-scoped, measure it, prove it, then think about what's next. So Davies wasn't dismissing that logic. He had a couple of really interesting, humorous points. But, one of them is if you're still learning the basics of ownership and gaining executive sponsorship, you're at the early stage, right? But his real point was that for large enterprises trying to scale, the use case as a unit of planning has a structural limitation, and a real fundamental structural limitation. So you build something. It works in the context that you built it for. Then you try to adapt it to a slightly different context. Say it's a different market, a different menu, a different workflow, and it breaks. You've built a solution that's monolithic. It's optimized for one thing, and it doesn't transfer. At Yum's scale, rebuilding from scratch every time, it's just not sustainable, right? With that number of franchisees and different brands. So here's where we start to get into the concept of capabilities versus use cases. And the framework that Davies described is what he calls scalable skills, creating scalable AI skills. And the analogy he used with his team is worth repeating because I think it's generally useful. He said you could build a baseball pitching robot, and it would be an excellent baseball pitching robot. It would throw fastballs, it would throw curveballs, it would throw changeups, all at the right speed and location. But the moment you need it to do something else, it's useless. It was built for one thing. So what Yum is building instead is what he called a throwing machine. It's a capability that doesn't care what it's holding or what the target is. It just throws. It throws with precision and reliability. And then you layer on a hitting machine and a catching machine. Modular skills that can be composed into or used in different things. So I think of this like Lego blocks. These Lego blocks, which you could call AI capabilities, AI skills, although skills in AI has a specific meaning, maybe specific AI agents. These themselves are the investment that we're looking to make. And once you have enough of those blocks, you can build different things quickly. A car, a tower, a robot, that's what you do with Legos, right? Because the components are already designed to snap together. So for Yum, this looks like customer-facing agents that can show up across multiple use cases and team productivity agents that can work across multiple workflows. The capability is built once, the use cases are assembled from it, or I should say the solution to the use cases are assembled from it. So the practical result is once the capability infrastructure is in place, a new deployment can happen and be built within weeks, not years, months, quarters, but hopefully weeks is what we're going for with the capabilities model. So what does this require? And I want to be clear, you probably just can't decide to go out and do this. There are a few things that have to be in place, and Davies was direct about both. The first is around integration. AI agents are only as powerful as the systems that they can access and act within. And for Yum, this is Byte, their proprietary platform that spans e-commerce, point of sale, kitchen display, and menu systems. It's a foundational thing. It's something that they have spent considerable effort on building. So they're building and owning the integration layer that makes that AI capability model real. And without it, Davies said that you would die 1,000 integration cuts. So I've heard the issues with integration from enough enterprise buyers to believe that part completely. But that doesn't mean that it's easy and that you can easily go off and build your own AI platform. And I'll get to that in a second. But before I do that, that was Davies' opinion when it was around the integration. The second is governance. And this is where I want to spend a moment because Davies opened his entire framework with this point. And I think a lot of organizations still treat governance as something you do after you deploy, or maybe in tandem, but not necessarily integrated. So Davies said that there's no intelligence without governance. And then he gave a really great story that he was talking about working with Manoj Saxena, who chairs the Responsible AI Institute. And that Manoj made this point where it was a really interesting image that struck with me. He said that deploying AI agents without governance is like building little Chuckies, if you remember the horror movie. It's like sending autonomous agents loose into your system with a knife in one hand and a credit card in the other hand and no way to see what they're doing. So if you can imagine like slicing and dicing and all that bad stuff that could happen. So that's not a technology problem, that's the governance gap. and a governance gap at machine speed can be catastrophic. So we have to really focus on that. I know I say this in almost, somehow I manage to get governance in almost every AI discussion I give you. But that is because I do believe, from talking to many, many organizations that seem to be getting it right, that one of the things they're getting right at the outset is governance. So if you don't have agent registries, authorization frameworks, observability, it's hard for you to do this. These aren't really optional features. They're the foundation. So you definitely need to think about that. Okay, so then the next thing that Davies emphasized that I want to highlight, because it kind of connects to everything else we've been talking about, and that's measurement. And I've mentioned this in several of my other podcasts. And his concept was simple. Always measure and never stop talking about it. In fact, he had this great little discussion where he was saying that, you remember the first rule of Fight Club? Nobody talks about Fight Club. And he's like, you remember the first rule of CrossFit? Everybody talks about CrossFit. He's like, measurement is like CrossFit. You talk about it all the time with everybody. And I laughed, but I could see where he's going with it. So he talked about building it into your systems from day one, not as a reporting obligation, but really more as an operational discipline. And he made a point that I've heard echoed by every AI leader I respect, and that's nobody's ever told them that they've had too much or have heard too much about measurement. No one's ever said, hey, we have too much confidence in our AI systems and how they're performing. The conversation is always in the other direction. They just don't feel very confident. They don't feel they have enough insight to know if this is working and if it matters. And so measurement matters so much in a capability-based architecture. It's really what allows the system to improve over time. So Yum describes their approach as an AI flywheel. We've heard the flywheel discussion a lot. The more surfaces they own, the more outcome data they collect, the better that data, the smarter the AI. The smarter the AI, the better the customer experience. The better the customer experience, the more people use it, and the more people come back. So that flywheel only spins if measurement is continuous. So that's one of the other things that he really focused on. So where does this leave enterprise leaders? If you're an organization and you're still building your first production AI deployments, the use case discipline is still right. You scope it, you measure it, you prove it, you use it as a way to understand what your data is capable of doing, what the technology is capable of providing, and you use the use cases to measure and clarify how it delivers value. Okay, but if you're past that, and now you're asking how to scale, this is where it starts to become much more complex. If you're looking across business units, geographies, brands, product lines, even if you're just a large company, the question worth asking is your architecture built for reuse? Are you building throwing machines or baseball pitching robots? And I'll personally be spending some time trying to figure out the differences between how we move from a use case to building AI capabilities, AI platforms. I've seen this before. The challenge is to always try to build the AI platforms before you know what you're doing and what you're ready for. But we are getting to a point now, particularly as we move more towards agentic AI, that we're thinking of breaking these things up, having the pieces start to interact with each other, be reassembled. So I do think there's a bit of a change in, my perspective on how we think about this. Now, the other thing I'd like to add is Yum is a big company. They're huge. We were obviously listening to the chief data scientist, so they're big enough to have a chief data scientist, and I'm guessing they have enough resources to design these capabilities in-house or enough partnerships to help them do that. So not everyone has this, and I want to be clear and cognizant of that when we're talking about this as a strategy. But I do believe directionally, this is where we're going to go. We're going to start thinking about AI not necessarily as big monoliths, maybe not even as platforms, because oftentimes the word platform implies kind of a monolith that goes with it. Well, I'm sure many people will debate that. But what I'm trying to get you to is the concept of Lego blocks. And I thought about this a while ago when we started talking about agents, just as a quick digression of we talked about composable architectures and microservices. And as we move into AI, is this sort of a similar concept? I think the blocks concept is really interesting. So how do we build blocks? How do we reassemble blocks and apply them to different things? But it is a challenging and nuanced way to do things. But I think the organizations that will sustain competitive advantage from AI are the ones that can figure out how to build AI in a way that it compounds, where each deployment makes the next one faster, where the infrastructure pays dividends over time. I mean, we can't just roll your own each and every time we want to put out a use case. It's not sustainable, it's not scalable. So there are some foundations that we know to be true, and I guess I'll end with those, and that's start with governance. I know I'm a broken record, but I'll just say it again. Build for integration, design for reuse where you can, see what kinds of things could be systematically reused, and measure continuously. So those are a few of the new rules for scaling AI. As always, thanks for listening. I hope this was useful. If it was, please share it with a colleague or a friend. Subscribe to the AI with Maribel Lopez podcast, either in the podcast channel of your choice, or if you like video in YouTube, or you could see it on LinkedIn or X, I'll be streaming it there. But I'll see you next time, and thanks for your time and attention.